Such a primitive vision. And yet the stories would have us bow down before you? Never!
So, after my video about the Ghost faction of Xenoblade Chronicles X, I originally intended to make a follow-up video. It only felt naturally to tackle the Samarians next, because the Federation of Samaar is another key element in the story of Xenoblade X that is just not present. Funnily enough, we have more screen time of it in the original view version than of the Ghost, because the Ghosts are only in the intro, and Samaar is inside the side quest and name dropped multiple times. Mainly in the Manon side quest, then Elma calls Gertia a Samarian witch, and the last thing I remember is within the final battle, where Luxa tells the party about the Samarians, how they are the predecessors of humans, and how they have created Ganglion. Now, I didn't end up making that video yet because I just didn't know how to tackle it. I wanted to do something similar years ago, and I made a long video during the time of Corona, but yeah. Ultimately, I chickened out and ended up making some Reddit posts about it instead. Now, with all that rambling out of the way, as of the time I'm recording this, I have no idea if this video is going to be as fancy as the other one, but yeah. Just before the release of Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, I just want to get out some thoughts of mine as what I think Samaar could be in terms of what we know and so on, and how it is maybe important for Xenoblade Chronicles X. I don't really want to call this a theory or anything, because I highly believe that whatever I am coming up with, it's not possible to predict anything. First off, a little interesting thing I found is that the name Samaar might be based on the term samsara. Samsara is a term in Buddhism. I hope I pronounced it right. Basically, it is the definition of the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. I don't know much about Buddhism as a whole, so I just read the entire article here. Samsara basically means the eternal cycle of life. It is, in a way, endless. You could almost call it an endless now, that you can only break free if you're inside of nirvana, the condition of being free from suffering and free from the cycle of rebirth. This gives us an interesting perspective on what Mira may be, even. Xenoblade Chronicles always likes to take elements from previous games and mirror them in some kind of way. Now, for one thing, if you take the world map of Ionios and flip it around, basically mirror it, literally, you get something that looks a bit similar to Mira's world map. And if we want to spin it a bit further and say that Ionios is dukkha in terms of Buddhism, the world of suffering and dissatisfaction, the world where we are always in this endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, that actually fits a lot. Mira would be the nirvana, the world where we actually aren't in this eternal cycle. It might be something like heaven, but that is not the full point of the video. When I was analyzing the lyrics of Black Tar, I was highlighting the line, not to sound cliche, but this world sucks, and I was thinking about what if everyone that is possessed by the black fog, as I mentioned in my ghost video, or whatever happens with someone after they died in Mira, that they might end up in a world that is basically the heaven of Xenoblade Chronicles X, or at least the heaven of Mira. At least that is what I believed after seeing the scene where Lao wakes up at the beach. Maybe he becomes the Xenoblade X equivalent of Mobius. Maybe he even becomes the Xenoblade X equivalent of Gnosis, which would be the ghost. If you don't know what Gnosis are, these are among the main antagonists from Xenosaga, which are, if I remember correctly, humans that have died and do not accept that they die, and instead of becoming one with the collective consciousness, turn into Gnosis and are in search of the Zohar. Please just correct me in the comments if I messed up here. I am not the biggest Xenosaga fan, and it's been a few years since I have watched Eno's playthrough. Now, the biggest difference between Xenoblade X, or rather between Mira and Ionios, is obviously that in Mira, once you're dead, you're dead. But what is also important is that you can literally try to travel through time and space, but you're not physically possible. It is not possible to escape Mira. You are trapped here. You can't get away from it, no matter how you try. It's basically a space-time anomaly, as pointed out in a cutscene in Chapter 5, if I remember correctly. It's the one where we see the Vita the first time, and where Gautier is talking to Luxa. So I think it wouldn't be too off to say that even your soul is not possible to escape. This would be highlighted by the fact that the Lifehold servers are just... They are destroyed. As that is the big plot twist at the end of Xenoblade X, and it essentially means that the soul of every human that is inside a Mimuid, they are trapped inside those machines, and they are treated by the planet of Mira as a whole being. These are the real bodies now. And maybe not even in death you are able to escape Mira. It's just that, unlike in Ionios, you're not reborn. Or maybe you are, as we see with Lao. This could be either because he opposes the fact that he is going to die, and he rejects becoming part of a collective consciousness that might exist on Mira. It might also be because he has sucked up all the DNA of Earth, and due to that has become some sort of origin and is now important to the universe. Or maybe he's becoming a new form of Mobius. Mobius are based off the testaments from Xenosaga as well, and a testament in Xenosaga is basically a person that is held alive, and it's a very powerful being that has a very strong will. You have to also lose your physical body, and I don't know how to properly explain it, so I'll just screenshot the Wikipedia article, and which probably has some mistakes, but yeah, this is a quality video. So, after we have rambled about this for 10 minutes, we can finally begin with the real Samaar Federation. So, just like the Ghost, there is not really much we see of the Sumerians, And the direct opposite of Sumerian and Ghost in this context is that we see most of them at the end, while we see most of the Ghosts at the beginning of the game. Might be a coincidence, I think not. But let's just push that aside for now. The other big difference is that the Samarians are at least mentioned and described in their own game, but it's not clear if they are our allies or enemies. We can only assume based on what is said in the game. I personally think they are more an enemy faction because Alma doesn't seem to be too fond of them. But also not about the Ghost, so whatever. There is, however, one thing about Samaar that I got fundamentally wrong. At least I think I did. And I might not be the only one. And that is about their connection to the ganglion and how it might make sense. So, while the Samaar are mentioned and while the ganglion are a part of Samaar, I would say they alone can't be treated as Samaar. So yeah, ganglion is part of Samaar, but they are just a small fraction. They are described as a crime syndicate that belongs to the entirety of Samaar. They are not the main topic that I'd like to discuss here. That would be the mans behind Samaar, the Samarians themselves. But the ganglion are an important factor of them. So, as I said, Elme insults Geryth as a Samarian witch in Chapter 5, which is also the first time where the game foreshadows that Alma is actually xenoform. Or at least a person that knows much more than she likes to admit. Finally, in terms of the main story, we learn that the ganglion were actually created by the Samarians, and it is worth noting that ganglion seems to refer not only to the ganglion as a fraction, but also as a race itself. We could say that ganglion might mean the entirety of all races that were created as servants by Samaar. Maybe even including humans, or at least the humans we know from the game. Maybe even the humans that we control, or at least their DNA, or their failsafe, which is the reason why Luxa wants to erase humanity. He is afraid that they are used, or rather their DNA is used against the ganglion to wipe them out if they should rebel. Side note, the original name of ganglion was Growth. I don't think there will be much changes in the script of the new Switch release of Xenoblade X, except that it's basically like Persona 5 Royal in terms of how much content there actually is going to be included, but I just wanted to mention it. In the end, while the name Growth doesn't link to the nervous system as ganglion did, it remains a name for not a specific race, but rather a term for multiple races that have been created by Samaar. At least that is my theory. Because before we analyze the current finale of Xenoblade Chronicles X, the final chapter of the Wii U version, I need to highlight that at the end of the Zarubigan questline, we find out that the god Galboga, which the Zarubigan worship, is actually in the same shape as humans, which pretty much confirms that at least they are also a product of Samaar. Why? Because it is confirmed that the Samarians are the predecessors of the humans in Xenoblade X. And not only that, the humans of X also serves as a failsafe, as I mentioned earlier, meaning it's likely that they too are artificial. Now that is the point where I must say that I am just too overwhelmed by the possibilities. I just can't fully say. what might be the next step here. The popular theory is that the humans we see in Xenoblade X have fake memories implanted. Fake memories about the destruction of Earth, and fake memories about everything of the Earth itself. And that is kind of difficult to phrase because, as we know, all the humans in Xenoblade X, they remember the real Earth. They remember how it used to be in the year 2052? Was that the date? Most of this here is like without a script, by the way. Basically, this means that everyone in Xenoblade X is literally artificial. But even though this might be the case, I also think it could just be that these people are really from the Earth. We could link this to Xenoblade Future Redeemed, where there is the space colonization program, which is also called Project Exodus. And while many people use that to counter argument that Xenoblade X can't take place in the mainline series, I think just because there are two projects now known as Project Exodus, it doesn't mean that the other one can't exist. But again, we have not much context in this regard. So instead of trying to make a single way to prove that Dmitry Yuryev's name drop is not just an Easter egg, and to spin anything crazy to say this confirms that these games are 100% connected, because it won't be true anyway, but somehow Mr. Takashi will find a way to make it work. I am just going to talk about what I think about the Samarians. Counterproductively, I will say that the idea of a space colonization program seems pretty likely here. So maybe the Earth that we see that is destroyed is actually not the real Earth, but maybe just a copy, which is pretty interesting because, well, many people, as I said, have a lot of memories. They even describe certain locations, and therefore it is pretty unlikely that it is just a perfect copy, and the idea of implanted memory seems even more likely. But we also know that Xenoblade Chronicles likes to pull out old ideas, and one of those ideas could be to reuse the cycle of time, or rather the state that everything in Xenoblade Chronicles has happened before and will happen almost the exact same way again. This is something that happens in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. This is something that kinda happens in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And this is also something that happens in Xenosaga. So maybe the Samarians are an offspring of humanity that has colonized space and has made it possible to either overcome or even create this eternal loop of time. And instead of creating a failsafe, they just made the ganglion, their creations, vulnerable to the DNA of their predecessors. Or was it ancestors? I think it was ancestors. So that could be one reason why there is an exact copy of Earth in Xenoblade Chronicles X. Now the next question is, where are the aliens from? If this game also uses other concepts of Xenosaga, then we should only have humans in the world of Xenoblade Chronicles X as well. And as we established earlier, the Zarubugans are most likely also a creation of Samaar. So what if every single Xenorace in some shape or form is an offspring of the experiments from Samaar? No matter how we spin it, I think Samaar is going to have access to some sort of Zohar device, or conduit in terms of Xenoblade. Something that will serve as a power source to create entire universes, just like Klaus did in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. To me, the conduit, or rather the way how humans have used it, it serves as some sort of build your own universe playset. But you have to be extremely careful, because if you don't use it right, you will mess up a lot. And I mean a lot. This is why it took Klaus so long to actually recreate the Earth. He had to fix entire elements by himself, if you listen close enough, in his explanation in his massive lore dump at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It could also explain why the Samarians are mostly absent. Because maybe they don't even exist anymore, or maybe they exist in a different, in a higher plane.
I confess, you were right about one. I was indeed fearful of humanity, of your threat. At the dawn of the cosmos, the Samarians arrived from another plane. We are forbidden from turning against them. If we ever tried, we would be destroyed. I thought that it was just a myth. And yet here you are, the descendants of Samaar. You miserable humans!
Perhaps humanity evolved into the next stage of living, or however you want to call that, in form of the Samarians. It could also be that the Samarians are the original creators of the conduit, the origin of everything. And that every humanoid species we see in Xenoblade X, including the Klee, which are getting their erased party member back in the definitive edition, maybe all of them are an image or an afterthought of them. Maybe the Samarian too are also just a collective term for a much bigger collection of species. Just like the ghost might be just a collection of souls that are all from compatible life forms, gathered within another system similar to the Xenoblade 3 origin. So, lastly, there is another thing that I have no idea how else to place it or where else to place it. This entire video is also all over the place. I basically said most of the stuff that I wanted to say, so why not wrap it up with this? What the hell is Mira? Now, Mira seems to be a collection of all kinds of things that we have seen within Xenoblade Chronicles 1, but also a lot of new stuff. It is basically a collection, a little bit of everything. A collection of all kinds of Xenoraces, of all kinds of landscapes, and I'm pretty sure a few little things would even work in hindsight in terms of connecting them to Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3. Things like the... how were they called? Things like the Marmok, who have basically same way of living like the people of Ionios, killing others, sacrificing souls to their queen, living on as a legend, and so on. And then also Xenoblade Chronicles 2. There are actually crystals that have life in them, if I remember correctly. And also the entirety of Sylvanum has DNA shaped salts. And to me, Sylvanum looks a little bit like the Danak Desert. But I might be too hopeful here. What you can't deny is that there is the giant gear of Mechonis in Oblivia, and that we have a giant Telephier that has to come from somewhere. Might just be a reference, just like Dmitry Yuriev, but we will see. So, just like Ionios was a recreation of trash and memories that were stored within Ontos, who gathered data from both Pneuma and Logos, Mira could be some kind of collection of all the trash that has gathered within the universe, or that has gathered within the system of whatever hell holds Mira together. If we look at this concept art of Mira, it basically looks like a planet that is about to blast, only held together by duct tape and dark matter. We can also see a familiar looking tower here. I don't know if I repeat myself. Did I say that in the Ghost video? So this might be just another program that was working similar to the one from Klaus. It might be another tower that was yeeted into an entirely different universe and that is now doing its entire own thing. It could be everything. If we want to keep the religious themes at the beginning of the video, we could also pull out a different story, this time from the Book of Genesis, and I'm talking about the Tower of Babel. Now, not the entire thing, but basically the Tower of Babel was a project by a united humanity that was speaking just a single language to create a city that will reach the sky and therefore also God. This was the Tower of Babel, but in order to stop them, humanity was cursed by having different languages all of a sudden, so they could not understand each other again. They were then also scattered around the world, and the project could not be finished. Maybe, just maybe, Mira is a reference to that, but also mirrors it a little bit, because in Mira it is highlighted that Xenos should not be able to understand each other, much less humans. The communication in Mira, however, seems to happen different, just like living in Mira seems to work different. Mira is just built different. So basically, instead of dividing humans and other races, Mira unites them. This goes as far as changing the way a race even works. We can see this with the Orpheans. This is a species that multiplies like cells. They use a specific type of water that will then destroy their body, or not really destroy their body, but they will be divided into two different new entities, maybe even multiple, but in the cutscene that we saw, they were split in half, and two new Orpheans were born. Orpheans are portrayed as a very logical species, as a species that works not as emotionally driven, but mostly on an instinct to survive and on an instinct to evolve, if you want to describe it like that. Once they have settled in Mira, or rather in New Los Angeles, however, a subspecies of Orpheans kept popping up in form of the Red Orpheans. Not only are Orpheans now capable to develop a form of love for each other, or at least between the Red and the regular colored Orpheans, the Red Orpheans also seem to be much more emotional, and they also seem to be drawn to the Telethia, which is interesting because the Telethia also seems to be hostile against the Orpheans. Sorry if I might mix things up, but what I'm trying to say here is, again, this is not a well-formed theory, I just try to get out my thoughts in as much honesty as possible. What I'm trying to say is that Mira basically tries to brute force to change every living being on it into something united. It tries to make the Orpheans into something more human. You could say something artificially created to work logically is twisted to become less irrational, to become more of what makes humans humans. Mira might be another way to... Mira can in certain situations also described as a pretty prehistoric planet, while there were signs of civilizations that probably have lived here a long time ago, or maybe these are just leftovers from different dimensions, from different worlds that have been mashed together here. It is a rather young planet, or also just the end of a planet that is now inhabited mostly by wildlife that has yet to form any intelligent life forms. As you can see, things get pretty complicated, and I would say we should just wait for Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition to answer all the questions and give us inevitably even more questions that we won't get any answers to for at least another 10 years. But what I want to say is that in Mira there is a slow process that seems to want to make everyone and everything into a whole being, to form them into a collective consciousness. And this mirrors the speech that Alvis gives at the very end of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, where he sees a future where every living being walks into the future hand in hand. And this might be a bad version of just that. A planet, maybe even an experiment that failed horribly and is now devouring everything that it was meant to unite, without any idea how to accomplish the original thought, ending up in a mess. One last note is that the Ganglion are in search of the Samarian homeland. This can be believed to be the Earth, and, well, that is kind of interesting, because if they were searching for a Samarian homeland, wouldn't the Earth in the intro be just that? Now, I don't want to open this now because this would be the topic for a completely new, a completely different video. But for that I would have to explain a lot more about Xenosaga, and I'm not really qualified to do this, I say. And I also don't really know if I could pull this off either. Now at the end of the day, I have now finally made this video. Or at least I have recorded the audio. I still gotta make the video. I don't know if it will look as fancy as I mentioned before, but yeah. I hope you're all looking forward as much as I do to Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. Feel free to frame any wishes you hope to see in the final product into the comments. And I also want to thank you for all the views you've given me on the Ghost video. Reading all these comments is pretty fun, and actually one person who has written a comment has encouraged me to do just that, to just sit down and record this video here. So yeah, we could also make a bet. Do you think we will see more answers or more new questions pop up in Xenoblade Chronicles X? There is a whole lot of unused content that seems to return, and yeah, it is stated that this game has the most stuff written for it than every other Xeno game in existence, so yeah, it's going to be amazing, and maybe even the start of a new trilogy. So anyway, I wish you a good day, a good morning, or a good evening, or whatever time it is right now.